Today's daf we're going to be learning is Kiddushin daf Memvav. Today's daf is sponsored by Glenda Sachs in honor of Sari Esterman's birthday and in memory of her beloved mother. Today's daf is sponsored by the Hadran Zoom family in honor of the marriage of Shiur Neumann to Amitai Levy, the son of our co-learner Dalia Levy. Ben Kesel Esol, we continue to learn and celebrate Mazel Tov. Okay, we're going to get started now with the last case in our series of a woman who gets betrothed without the knowledge of her father. So just a quick review. We saw a woman who gets betrothed at the end of the daf, and her father betroths her in the first case and then goes abroad, and then she does the marriage without his knowledge. Again, do we assume do we have to be concerned that maybe he'll come back and oppose and therefore she can't eat truma all this while? Or she can eat truma right away because anyway, she can eat truma on a Torah level once she's betrothed. And since the father betrothed her, maybe it's okay. The second case is also the father betrothed her and also she got married without his wishes, but he was there, right? He was in the town. And when he hears, it's not that we have to wait to see, is he going to protest when he gets home, but he's here and he just doesn't respond. So the question is, how do we understand his lack of response? Is it because he's angry, according to one opinion, and therefore we assume it's not effective? Or is it because he agrees, and therefore it is effective? Now, just pay attention, because Rav Huna in that case said she can't eat truma. We assume he's angry. And Rav Yomi bar Abba says she can eat truma because we assume that he's just agreeing with it. Now comes our last case, 5 lines from the bottom of yesterday's daf. Nitkadsha shelo ledat avia, v'niseit shelo ledat. This time, it's not like the previous two. The Kiddushin wasn't done with the father's consent. She did it all without his consent, betrothal and marriage. And now the question is, can she eat truma or not? Because she's married, the question is, how valid is this marriage? Avia kan, and the father is around and the father doesn't respond. So now notice what happens. Rav Huna, who said before she can't eat truma, in this case says ochelet. She can eat truma. Last time he understood the silence as anger. This time he actually says she can eat truma, which is strange. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba amar ein ochelet. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba makes more sense. He switches from she can't eat truma to she can eat truma because, he switches from she can eat truma to she can't eat truma because in this case, the Kiddushin wasn't even done with the father's consent. So if nothing was done with the father's consent, less likely we're going to let this woman eat truma, right? Less likely the father's going to agree. Even if he was silent, it would be more likely we'd understand his silence as, I really disagree with you, I'm not happy with what you did, and therefore she wouldn't be allowed to eat truma, because again, just to remember, if the father, we have this scale, maybe we'll start with this scale. On one extreme, we have the father can betroth the daughter completely. She's 100% married on a Torah level. Then we have the father is not around. Okay, doesn't mean he's abroad. It means the father is either dead, okay, not alive, or the father has relinquished his rights to the daughter, which until now we've been saying really means that he betrothed her already and she got married, and then she leaves his domain even if she's a minor still. Okay, he can't betroth her again. So in either one of those two cases, it's called Yitoma b'chayei ha'av or Yitoma. Okay, either she's an orphan or she's an orphan while her father's still alive because he has no rights to her anymore. In that case, she can betroth herself, or her mother can betroth her, or her brother can betroth her, but the betrothal only has validity on a rabbinic level. Our situations are not that and not that. We're talking about a situation now where the father is around, which means he's really in charge of her, not like the previous case where I just said he wasn't, but he's in charge of her. She's not an orphan in her father's lifetime. He's here. He's in charge. And she does it without his will. The question is there any validity to that action, right? Really, it's not much of anything unless the father consents. If the father consents, then it puts us all to the other extreme, which is, well, then it will be Kiddushin on a Torah level. And then, of course, she can eat truma. So that's the question here. So Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba says she can't eat because it's nothing. She's done absolutely nothing since the father wasn't consulted, nothing at all. Even though he's silent when he hears, we assume he obviously doesn't agree with this. So now Amar Ula. Ula is troubled by Rav Huna because he says, Rav Huna, it's like vinegar in the teeth or smoke in the eyes, which basically, right, is bad for your eyes, bad for your teeth. Basically meaning it's a ridiculous thing he says. When there was actually Kiddushin that the father did, he did the Kiddushin in the previous case. And what did Rav Huna say? She can't eat truma. So hashda, where we're not even sure if there's Kiddushin on a Torah level. How come, and when there was Kiddushin on a Torah level and she did the marriage without his consent, she couldn't eat truma. So of course here, where nothing was done with the father's consent, lo kol sheken, wouldn't it be all the more so she wouldn't eat truma? So how did Rav Huna do a total switch and say, in this case, the father wasn't involved at all, she can eat truma? Makes no sense, and therefore we now learn that Rav Yomi Bar Abba was a student of Rav Huna, and therefore he says, I would side with him rather than Rav Huna, even though normally we side with the teacher. Rav Huna makes no sense. However, because this is the Gemara, Rava comes along and says, I'm going to explain to you Rav Huna's approach and why he shifts gears here. In the previous case, what happened? The father did the Kiddushin, the daughter got married without his consent. And what did we describe yesterday, right? The father's very annoyed at the daughter for going and getting married without involving him. First of all, he was even in the city, and very, very angry, so angry that he's just silent and doesn't even open his mouth. He's so angry. And that's why we assume the father objected, and that's why she can't eat truma. But in this case, it's different. Why is it different? So let's read. My Talmud de Rav Huna, Rabba says, doesn't really explain it so much, but commentaries help, which is what happened here. The father wasn't just silent once. He was silent twice, right? He was silent about the Kiddushin, and he was silent about the Nisuin. That's different. If two actions happen, and in each action he doesn't respond, then, first of all, you can even think of it this way. If the Kiddushin happened against his will and he didn't stop it, right, then presumably he was okay with it because he basically let it go to the next level of the Nisuin. So therefore, whereas the last time it was just the Nisuin where it's too late. But, right, and then he was so angry about it, he just didn't even say anything. But forgetting about even that, just the fact that he was silent twice is a clear indicator that it's like a ma'aseh yitoma b'chayei ha'av. It's as if, even though the father is here, and we said when the father's there, he has full authority over her, unless he dies or unless he already married her off to somebody else and she was fully married and then she goes into her own domain. Now we learn that there's a third possibility of the woman being able to do the Kiddushin herself. And a second possibility of what a yitoma b'chayei ha'av is. If the father just relinquishes his rights and said, do what you want, I don't care, well, then she could actually come into her own. And in this case, the fact that he doesn't react twice to what she's doing is an indicator that he's basically saying, do whatever you want and leave me out of it. And then she becomes a yitoma b'chayei ha'av, which then allows her, she's no longer in category 3, that she did this without the father's consent and it's nothing. No, the father is not in the picture anymore. And then it's like the regular case where she can actually accept a betrothal on a rabbinic level anyway. And that would then allow her to eat truma because she is married on a rabbinic level, which would allow her the truma. Okay, now, Itmar. Now we're going to have another machloket about this, about another issue. If a woman, okay, same thing, gets betrothed without her father's knowledge, amarav, ben hi ben avia yecholim la'akev. Now we talked about, okay, let's just go back again to our 3 cases. We have Kiddushin on a Torah level. The father does it for the daughter. There's nothing, if you want to get out of that, how do you get out of it? Divorce only. Okay, because even Kiddushin, even though it's just engagement, it's not engagement as we call engagement nowadays. It's engagement that we do under the chuppah, which is a halachic engagement, which needs to be can be broken only by divorce or death, obviously. But talking about divorce here. Second option is Kiddushin de Rabbanan, which is all this thing we talked about, the minor, if the father's not there, right, not in existence or not functioning as the father, then the mother, the brother, or she herself can get betrothed and, right, or they can accept the betrothal for her. And how does she get out of that? Remember, miyun. She says, I don't want to be with this man when she gets of age, and the betrothal is off. She doesn't need to get or anything else, and she's in control there, okay? But if the father is around and she accepts a betrothal, the third case, it's so weak because the father's there and she did it on her own. The question is, how weak is it? How can we get out of it? So the first opinion, Rav says, it's so weak that either she or her father can just say, you don't even need miyun. They just basically say, we're not going ahead with this anymore. And it just disappears as if it never was. It's less than the miyun case. But Rav Asi Amar Avia Velohi. Rav Asi says only the father has rights because, again, She's in this realm. Now, it's interesting. It's enough of an action that it needs to be undone. But the only person who can undo it is the one driving the car, right? Who's driving the car? The father. So the father is the one in control here. Only he can do it and not her. Now, Rav Huna is going to raise a question on Ravasi. Eitave Rav Huna le Ravasi. So Eitave means it's going to bring a Tanaitic source against what the Semora said. But Amre lachia barav le Ravasi. So either Rav Huna or Chia barav through the source against Rav Huna. Against Ravasi. Now, the context is a little bit different, and it's taken out of context right now. And the Gemara eventually is going to say, you're totally misunderstanding this pasuk. But the Torah talks, if you remember, about someone who rapes a woman, right, a minor, and then he has to marry her, if you remember, because she's basically considered, less good in the eyes of other men, and we want to make sure this woman is protected and taken care of. Again, very always hard to understand with our modern viewpoint. But that's not our case for today. Then there's the mefate. The mefate is someone who seduces this young girl. And the Torah says, let's read it inside in Shmot Parakaf Bet, Ki yefate ish betula asher lo orasa. He seduces a woman who's a virgin, who is not betrothed, v'shachav ima, and he sleeps with her. So he seduces her, which means it was under her consent. She consented to it. Mahor yimarena lo liisha. He has to take her to be a wife. Okay, again, the same idea. He has to protect her now because she's kind of, second-class goods at this point. But if the father refuses, he doesn't like this person, he doesn't want the girl to be betrothed to this guy, the father gets money, by the way, she has to be a na'ara. Once she's a bogeret, it's not relevant anymore. Na'ara or ktana. So if the father refuses, then instead of betrothing her, where the husband would have promised her ketubah, he has to give her that same money. He gives it to the father without the marriage. Now, who has the rights, according to this, to refuse? The father. But the drasha says, sounds like only the father can refuse. What if the daughter herself doesn't want to marry this guy? Does she have to? Let's say the father thinks it's okay. Talmud lomar, okay, here, women's rights. Okay, the woman herself, the girl even, can say, I don't want to marry this guy. Okay, even if the father wants it, she could refuse and she doesn't have to marry him and he has to pay the money. Now, what does this have to do with our case? Well, right now, the Gemara is assuming that when they engage in sexual relations, remember, you can do betrothal by bi'ah, by having sexual relations. So the seduction was seducing for the purposes of marriage. And therefore, we're going to say now, what do you see here? What is this if not our case? It's nitkacha shelo ledat. Her father didn't know. That was the whole thing. She was seduced by this man without the father's knowledge. They went on and did what they did. And then the father finds out. And then what does it say here? Who can refuse? Either the father or the woman herself. So according to this, how can Rabasi say her father and not her? Here it says clearly in this drasha, she has the rights, Lamain. Now that's all assuming, which we're going to see in a minute, who's assuming that. But assuming that pitoy means the seduction, is he seduced her for the purposes of marriage or betrothal. So now, Amalahu Rav, lo tezlu batar ibcha, don't understand in this complicated way. You can explain it that he seduced her just for the sake of having sexual relations, but not for the purposes of betrothing her. So then they say, well, if it's pitah shelo l'shumishu krabai, if the pasuk is talking about he seduced her, not for the purposes of betrothal, well then, why do we need a pasuk to tell you either she or the father can refuse him to marry? Of course they can refuse. No one ever agreed to marriage. We weren't even talking about marriage. So why would there be this issue that we could say, oh, you can refuse for him to marry you? Of course you can refuse. Okay? There was no Kiddushin at all, anything. To which Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, no, what it's telling you is, it really is Shalol L'Shem Ish. Okay, when he seduced her, they were just, going to have sexual relations, not for the purposes of betrothal. But what's the chidush here that they can each say, we're not interested? Well, because there's an important ramification. Because lomar shemeshalem knas kemefuteh. What's the difference if they get married or not? The husband still, the seducer still has to put up the money, either in the ketubah or pay the father. But if he does it in the ketubah, he just has to commit the money. He doesn't have to actually take it out of pocket. So what they're telling you here is that he could want to go ahead with the marriage because it's easier for him, right? I mean, to a certain extent, he has to take care of his wife, but on the other hand, he doesn't have to put up the money right now. But they can refuse that if they want, okay? Either the girl or the father, but this has nothing at all to do with Kiddushin Shelo L'dat. There was no Kiddushin here. This is just saying that they can force him to pay the money right now because they could say, we're not interested in Kiddushin, pay up the money. Okay, and that's the focus of the pasuk. It has nothing to do with, right? In other words, we tried to suggest that maybe the seduction happened with an intent for Kiddushin, and that would teach us about our case. And then we would go against Rav Asi, who said that the woman herself can't, or the girl herself, can't reject this marriage that was done without her father's consent. Only he can do it because she accepted it, so therefore, how could she reject it now? But in the end, we say, and then, right, and it says here she can't. So that would go against Rav Asi, but they say, no, it's not actually talking about Kiddushin. So it doesn't prove anything. Now, Rav Yosef wants to prove this reading of the Braita about the Pitoy. Okay, prove the fact that these psukim about the Mefateh are not that he seduced her with the intent to betroth her. Okay, just to prove our point that we just made. And then Abai is going to reject the proof. But Rav Yosef, but we're going to have the answer, but it's just a rejected proof of our answer. Amale Rav Yosef, Yihachi Hainu Detanina. If so, well, this would be usually Yihachi is the beginning of a question. In this case, it's the beginning of a proof. If so, I can further prove what you're saying from this Braita. Hainu Detanina, Mahor Yimarena Lo L'isha, Shetzricha Yimenu Kiddushin. What does it say? Right? If he seduces her and sleeps with her, Mahor Yimarena Lo L'isha. What does it mean, Mahor Yimarena? It means he gives her money. But more than that, when do you give her money? In the Kiddushin. In other words, he has to do Kiddushin. Now, right? In Pita Lishum Ishud, if already the first action he did was to have relations with her for the purposes of Kiddushin, well then Kiddushin Lamali, why would he need to do Kiddushin a second time, right? And as if we understand this, Braita says that Mohori Marena Lo L'isha means he needs to do Kiddushin now. Well, he wouldn't need to do Kiddushin if originally he did Kiddushin. But Abai says that doesn't prove anything. You could say that perhaps they require a second Kiddushin with the father's consent, because the first one was clearly done without his consent, because again, that's the whole case of seduction. He seduces her, the father doesn't know what's happening, score was taken advantage of, and therefore the man needs to pay up for it, even though she consented. But again, we all know what it means, a minor consenting to a sexual action. We don't view it as she was 100% party to this and it was all her fault, and therefore we make him pay. Anyway, we make him do Kiddushin again because the Kiddushin the first time was done without the father's consent, and therefore it doesn't necessarily prove that there wasn't Kiddushin the first time. But in any case, in order to resolve the question against Rav Asi, we assume it's talking about there was no Kiddushin, no intent l'kadesh when he had sexual relations with her the first time when he seduced her, and therefore this has nothing to do with our situation. It's not a case of Kiddushin Shelo L'dat, and you can't learn from here anything. And again, it's not a question on Rav Asi. Now we're moving on to the next Mishnah, which we already saw yesterday, which is Haomer L'isha Hitkadshili B'tmaras Zo, Hitkadshili B'zo, or whether it was yesterday or 2 days ago now. Yeah, Mem Dalid. He says, be betrothed to me with this date. Hitkadshili B'zo, be betrothed to me with this date. Does it even with a few dates. Because he said, be betrothed to me with this. And then he said again, be betrothed to me with this. And each time he said a new language of betrothal, each one is viewed as independent. And if each date doesn't have a Shaveh pruta, there's no Kiddushin. If one of them does, then it will be found. But we don't look at the dates as a whole. Bizo. If he says, be betrothed to me, he says once, and then he says with this and with this and with this, then we view them all as one whole. And if you remember, we said this is all Rabbi Shimon. We're going to get there in a minute. Now we have this third case. Very interesting case, and I have a good story about it. If as he gave her each date, now we're not sure, is it talking about case 1 or case 2? We're going to have to get to this in the Gemara. Is it talking about when he said, Hitkadshi Bizo, or is it Hitkadshi with this, with this, with this? Either which way, we don't know yet. We'll get to it. She starts eating them as he gives them to her. So he gives it to her, and then she eats it. And then he continues to say, right, either, let's just assume it's the second case. Hitkadshi Bizo, Ubizo, right? And as she gets each one, she eats it. So, she's not betrothed unless one of them has a Shaveh pruta. We don't, right? The simple reading is to say it's talking about the second case, and we don't view them all as a whole now because they're gone immediately. So my story, I always think about this. It made a big impact on me and how I teach and how I view things and learning. I was always brought up learning by male teachers who came from a yeshiva type learning and always taught us in a very theoretical manner. And they'd look at a case like this and say, right, this is a very theoretical case. Who on earth under the chuppah would take a date and eat it and while the chuppah is going on? Could you imagine, right? The only thing you eat under the chuppah, right? You drink some wine, that's about it. Nobody starts eating dates under the chuppah. So I was asked many, many years ago, I was very young, I don't know, maybe 22, and I was asked to substitute for Rabbanit Malkabina in Matan for a Gemara Shiur she was giving, and this was the daf that I was to teach. So I get there and I start teaching the daf, and in my clearly very theoretical way. And what happens? A woman in the class says, wow, what a socioeconomic situation we're talking about here. This is a woman who is so poor and so hungry that she eats this right away. And all of a sudden it dawned on me that, in the classes I had always learned, like nobody would ever think about things in that way. And it was the first eye opener to me about how women, and particularly women who don't come with a strong background in Talmud, view the Gemara without the usual biases of, oh, this is all just these theoretical discussions, but look at it in a very real manner and want to understand what's the reality around it, what's going on, and it was very eye-opening to me because I had never really learned it in that kind of way. And it shifted my way of thinking. At least it was the beginning of a shift of understanding that there's a different way to be studying these texts. Anyway, you're going to see that the Gemara clearly thought about that issue as well. So, but anyway, having her say it in those words, the Gemara didn't exactly say it in those words, but they do really get at it. And it makes you understand this line we're going to see in a few minutes. So, man Tana hit kadshi. So now the Gemara wants to know, which we already know, who is the Tana of this Mishnah, who thinks that we're going to view each one separately once you say hit kadshi. And bizo is going to be all one chunk, one unit. Rabbi Shimon she already saw 2 days ago, which is, right, if you all claim that I owe you money, and I say, I swear I don't owe to you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and I lied to each of you, I only have to bring one sacrifice to atone for my lie. But if I said, I swear to you, and 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 I lied to each one of you, and because I said shvua to each one of you, I have to actually bring a sacrifice on each one. That's Rabbi Shimon's approach, and that clearly matches our Mishnah. Now we're going to get to this last line. Bizo, pruta v'chulei. Really, they're talking about not that line, but the last line, which is if she eats the dates. Ahaya. To which case is this referring? Now, again, it says it has to have a shava pruta in each one. So you would say it can't be referring to the first case because the first case anyway needed a shava pruta, whether she ate them or whether she didn't eat them. So that's what the Gemara is going to say right away. If it's the first case, hit kachi bizo. And then each time he says it, she eats it. As long as there's a shava pruta in one of them, it's good. Well, in any case, you needed a shava pruta in one of them. So it's no different than if she didn't eat them. So that case is adding absolutely nothing. Because he said each one with its own language of betroth me with this, betroth me with that. So that doesn't make any sense. This is, you have to get into a different kind of head to understand this question. If it's referring to the second case, he says it's kashili with this, with this, with this, and with this. And then he starts giving her dates. As he gives her each date, she eats it. Now it's said in the Mishnah, any one of them, right? If any one of them has a shava pruta, it's fine. Now it can't be, they're going to say now, even the first one or the second or the third, let's say there's 4, doesn't matter. Any one but the last doesn't make any sense here. Why? Now you have to understand a few things. If he says, I'm going to betroth you with $100, and he starts taking out a pile of money, and he takes out a 50, and then he takes out a 10, and another 10, another 10, and then he stops, and then he doesn't give her all the money. So what happens? She's not betrothed, right? And she basically has to return the money then, because the betrothal never went through. The money's his. Now, in this case, let's say he says, it's kachili bizo. And as he says, this one, she eats it. And then this one, she eats it. She keeps eating it. He doesn't get to the end of the Kiddushin yet because he hasn't given her the 4. Let's say he said with 5 dates. So until he gets to the 5th one, she's not betrothed. Now, at this point, she's not going to be able to return the date because she swallowed it if he changes his mind. So right now, it's as if she has a loan out with him. because she owes him all the money he gave her until he gets to the end, which means that if we're going to say the betrothal was on the first one or on the second one or on the third one, it's actually now turned into a loan. And what did we learn? You can't betroth a woman with a loan because, again, it's a little bit of a hard concept to understand. But because she ate it and it's no longer here, if he weren't to finish the Kiddushin, or she, if either one of them decided before the end of giving her all the dates that, because he's saying, betroth me with this and this and this and this and this, meaning you're not betrothed to me at the beginning, right, until you get to the end. Well, then, because it's no longer here, she has like an IOU until it's finished. So only really the last one will work, because the last one will be actually the value of the betrothal. All the others are basically a loan at this point. So if that's the case, we know you can't be betrothed with a loan, where basically with a cancellation of the loan, oh, you don't have to return me this, with that you'll be betrothed. So therefore, it doesn't make any sense that it would work. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, so Rabbi Yochanan says this interesting line, we have the table, we have the meat, we have the knife, everything is ready, but we don't have, or whether it's pele echol or something else, there's a word missing here, but we don't even have a mouth to eat it. Meaning we have a Mishna all organized, 3 cases in the Mishna, and we have no idea how to understand it. So Rav and Shmuel Damri Travayu, Rav and Shmuel come with one explanation, and Rabbi Ami is going to have a different. Rav and Shmuel say, La'olam Aresha, it's actually referring to the first case. And you said, oh, it's unnecessary. We'll explain it like this. The lo mebaya kamer. It's a lo mebaya structure, which means you're right. You didn't really need to give both, but we'll give you the easier case, and then we'll give you the more challenging case. And here's going to come in what that woman in that class said. Lo mebaya manachat. Not only do you say if, right, she didn't eat it, that you need a shava pruta in one of the dates, because again, each time he said he'd kachi, be betrothed to me with this, be betrothed with this. Each one is viewed independently. One of them has to have a shava pruta. Avalocheret, you might have thought, even if you had the first case, you wouldn't have understood if she eats it. Why? You might have thought, what's the whole idea of a shava pruta? It has to be valuable. But what is valuable? Valuable is objective or subjective, right? What did that woman say? This woman is obviously so hungry. To her, a date that's worth less than a pruta might be very valuable to her. Okay? She needs that food right now. To her, that date is like for you eating a super duper ice cream sundae or something, right? For her, that date is so important to her, right? Probably more than you eating an ice cream sundae. It's her life, right? She's not gonna survive if she doesn't eat that date. For her, she might be willing to get betrothed with something that's less than a pruta, because for her, it's worth more than a pruta. So because of that, you might have thought that maybe she's betrothed with it. Comes the Mishna to tell you, kamash malan, no. It's an objective standard. It's not subjective, what a shava pruta is. And therefore, it's not going to work. That's the first explanation. Rabbi Ami is going to go back and explain, no, it's really referring to the second case. La'olam ha'sefer, umay ad sheheh be'echad mehen shaveh pruta, he's going to change it and say it's obviously the last one. It won't work if it's the first or the second or the third, because those are viewed as loans until the deal is done. So therefore, again, particularly because she ate them and they're not here anymore, so she now owes the money if it doesn't go ahead. So therefore, it's only the last one has to have a shava pruta. And then you have to change the language a little bit. So now, I'm a Rava, Shmami Nami to Rabbi Ami Tzlat. You can learn 3 things from what he said. Shmamina, number 1, and this is going to be a good review of the sugya. Number 1, if you betroth someone with a loan, it doesn't work. Shmamina pruta data pruta. This is a good review of sugya we saw before. If he betroths her with both a loan and a pruta, then we assume that he really meant to betroth her with a pruta, because the loan doesn't work. So if you remember, we had a machloket about that. Was he referring to betrothing her with the loan, which wouldn't work, or was he referring to betrothing her with the pruta? In this case, if let's say there were 4 dates, so date number 1, 2, and 3 was he did a betrothal with a loan, and in addition, though, he did a betrothal with the pruta, because what did he do? He said he'd kachili with this and this and this and this and this, and within this and this and this, he gave her a bunch of different things. Some were right. One was okay for Kiddushin, the others weren't. The question is, what was his intent? Obviously, if this works, well, if the last one has a shava pruta, then we assume his intent was on the pruta. And we learn, this is going to lead us to our next sugya, that when he gives her money for a betrothal, and then let's say I was talking about the $100, he gave her 50, and then a 10, and then a 10, and then he decides, we're not going to have the betrothal, the money goes back to him. Okay, now why wouldn't it go back to him? Well, maybe you think that he was giving her the money as a gift. No, the money is not viewed as a gift. He gets his money back. Okay, that's what it means. Like if a deal didn't go through here, like this case also, the money goes back. And that leads us to a new machloket, which is going to take us to the end of the daf. What we're going to do right now is we're going to bring machloket Rav and Shmuel. I want you to get the structure because it's going to get a little confusing. Now at the top of Amud Bet, we're going to have a machloket Rav and Shmuel. We're going to bring a source that seems to contradict Shmuel, a Mishna, and then is it a Mishna? Forget now, we'll see. Anyway, we're going to bring a source, that's going to go against Shmuel from a totally different topic. And then Shmuel's topic in general is different. And then we're going to bring a source that goes against him. And then we're going to resolve the contradiction. And then we're going to try to understand the source. And we're going to have a few questions about this source. Okay, 2 questions basically that they'll resolve. It's a little bit complicated. That's why I'm telling you the structure up front. Itmar, hamikadesh achoto. Rav Amar ma'ot chuzrim. If we're already talking about money going back. So let's say a man betroths his sister. Now we already learned you betroth your sister. That's a rayo, forbidden relations. The money goes, the Kiddushin is not valid. So what happens with the money he gave her, or the gift, or whatever it was he gave her, the ring, whatever he gave her? Rav says they go back to her. Shmuel says ma'om matana. He was giving her a gift, and she gets to keep it as a gift. So now let's explain why. Rav Amar ma'ot chuzrim. Why? Now both of them are going to be premised on the same premise, which is Adam yodea she'ein kiddushin tofsim b'achoto. Every person in the world knows that a brother and sister cannot get married, and there's no kiddushin there. So therefore, what was he doing when he gave her the money? He obviously wasn't intending it to be for kiddushin. So Rav says she gets the money back because he obviously was trying to gamar v'natan l'shem pikadon. He was giving her the money or whatever it was, the object, to watch for him. So now the Gemara says, if he was giving it to watch, why didn't he just say, I'm giving this to you to watch? Why did he why did he couch it in this, you're going to be betrothed to me with this? To which they answer, Savar lo makabla. He thought she wouldn't accept it. If he told her, I want you to watch this, maybe she wouldn't want the responsibility. So instead, he did it in this way. And with that, he could get it into her hands without her really understanding what was going on. And then she would have to watch it for him. Okay, it's a little bit strange why Kiddushin. The whole thing is very weird. It doesn't really fully answer the question, but I'll leave it as a bit of an open question. So we're going to do the exact same thing with Shmuel. Shmuel savar ma'om matana. Why? Because Adam yodea she'ein kiddushin tofsim b'achoto. He agrees with Rav about the principle that obviously they know this wasn't for Kiddushin. But the question, according to Shmuel, is what was going on in his head then that he gave it to her? Well, damar v'natan l'shu matana. He gave her as a gift. To which they ask the same question. Why didn't he just say, oh, happy birthday, here's a gift for you? Why did he say, with this ring or something like that? He thought it would be embarrassing for her. She wouldn't want to accept a gift. So he did it in this way. Again, this doesn't really explain why, if he did it in Kiddushin, is she going to accept it? But the point is, each one thinks that either he was giving it to her as an object to watch, or he was giving it to her as a gift. Both of them assume it's clear he wasn't giving it to her for Kiddushin, so it must be something else. Each one has a different opinion, and then that affects whether or not she has to return the item. So now, remember Shmuel, because he's the one we're going to question right now. Shmuel says it's a gift she doesn't have to return. So now, this assumes, now, what's the premise? When you know that something is clearly not what it looks like, and you give it to the person anyway, you're obviously just giving it to them as a gift. Well, that's going to be contradicted by a Mishna in Halla. Mativ Ravina. Ravina says, laws of Halla, the Torah says that you're supposed to take reshit arisotechem. You take a little bit of your dough and you give it to the kohen. That means the obligation only kicks in when your flour is used as dough, but not when it's flour. So what if your mafrish chalato kemach? You took flour and you gave it to the kohen as challah. That is not challah. Eino challah. Now, according to this, so let's say you did it anyway. Now, if everybody knows that it's not challah, then what are we assuming? You just wanted to give the kohen a gift. You thought the kohen wouldn't accept it, so you called it challah, and then, the kohen will accept it. And then, theoretically, it's a gift, and you can keep it, according to Shmuel. But that's not what this Mishna says. This Mishna says, if you're the kohen, and you got challah from someone who gave you just raw flour, gezel biyad kohen. It's like you have a stolen item in your property. Okay, we're not saying you stole, but it's like you have a stolen item in your property. And basically that means you have to return it to the person who gave it to you, which is balagan for the kohen. Okay, which is why the Gemara is going to ask later, why don't we come up with other easier solutions? That's going to be the Gemara's question later. But right now they say, everybody knows, right? Anyone who makes challah at home knows you don't take it from the dough, from the raw flour, you take it from the dough. So everybody knows that. And therefore, since everybody knows that, why wouldn't you say Natan l'shem matana like Shmuel said? To which they answer, Shane hatam denapik chorva mine. This could lead to problems. Okay, if I'm the kohen, okay, let's assume I'm the kohen. I get this challah from you. You call it challah. So I could get confused, even though I know, and then we're going to have to say, well, if you know, you know. So why would you get confused? We'll get back to that. But I could think, okay, there's a certain minimum amount that you need of flour in order to be obligated in Halla. Okay, this is 1.25 kav of flour. So it could be I'll have less than 1.25. They call it 5/4, which is 1.25. Okay, it's easier to say 1.25 than 5/4. But you have 1.25 kav of flour. And now let's say I have less than that. So I'm a kohen. Now, kohen apparently has to give challah also. So if I have a dough that I'm making with less than the amount that's required, and then you bring me this flour, and I say, oh, great, you called it challah, which means it's not obligated, that I don't have to be mafresh challah from it. And what will happen? I'll mix it with my dough. I'll take your flour, I'll add it to mine. At this point, I have 1.25. So I'm obligated in challah, but akasaval, but I think I'm not, because I used my flour, which was obligated, but I didn't have enough of it. I added your flour, which was challah, and that's not obligated in challah, but it is, because it's really nothing, right? It's just a gift. But I think that it is. And then I'll eat this dough without taking challah from it. So now the Gemara says, why are we worried the Kohen's going to get confused, right? In other words, first we said, this is a problem to Shmuel. Why do you have to return it? Why can't it just be viewed as a gift? Answer is, the Mekadesh Achoto is a gift, but this can't be viewed as a gift, because if we viewed it as a gift, it could cause a halachic issue, meaning it's a side reason. Theoretically, it could be a gift, but we're worried I would get confused. To which they say, but didn't you just say, Ha'amal, Adam Yodeh she'em mafrishim challah kemach? Didn't you just say, though, everybody knows if I'm a kohen and I get flour, I know it's not challah. So why would we be confused? And why would I get confused and think that it's challah and end up making a dough and not taking challah from it by accident? Yodeh ve'ino yodeh. Well, he knows, but he doesn't know fully. Okay, what does he know? Well, yodeh she'em mafrishim challah kemach. Everybody knows that you don't take flour for challah. However, what won't I maybe know? Now, this is always dangerous. When you start to say, what's the reason for the mitzvah? What's the reason why you have to give it to me as dough? Mishum tircha de kohen. We don't want the kohanim to have to make all their own dough. We want their lives to be a little easier, right? They're the ones who work in the temple, right? They don't have their own land. So we give them things both because they don't have their own land, but also we want to make it easier for them. So you give it to them as dough. All they have to do is stick it in the oven and bake it. And tircha de kohen achilte. Well, if it's just a matter of, is it a pain in the neck for me, the kohen, I can just be mochel on that, right? I could say, I don't care. I can take it. I make my own challah all the time. It doesn't bother me. I'll just make my own bread. I'll be happy to make it. And then I would think then that even though you normally don't take it as dough, as flour, you can't give it, maybe I can actually relinquish my rights to get it as dough, and therefore I would think this maybe really is challah. That could cause the confusion. Okay, that's the end of our section in terms of, okay, we could really stop here because we've asked the question again, Shmuel, why there is it a matana, and in the challah case, it's not viewed as a matana, and you actually have to return it. And the answer is because we're worried that you might come to mess up as the kohen, know something, but not know something else, be too smart for your, right? And kind of try to figure out why that's the case, why the Torah said your dough, and maybe think that you could actually relinquish your rights to that and accept it as challah, which could cause you to make a mistake and make a dough in your house and not take challah from it, thinking that you're not obligated, and you really are. Now the Gemara is going to ask two separate questions. Each one's going to be a little bit lengthy about this Mishnah. Okay, so forget about Shmuel. We're done with Shmuel, but now we have a question on this Mishnah. V'tavi truma. Why don't we say, let the kohen keep it? We'd rather let the kohen keep it. It's a pain in the neck to make this kohen. This kohen, bad enough he didn't get his challah, but now he has to go find the person and return it. Why don't we just say keep it as if it's a gift? Okay, like truma, not meaning it's kadosh and sanctified as truma, but Halla and truma are kind of interchangeable, but meaning keep it as a gift that you got from them. Well, in order to resolve this so that we don't make him, right, we don't have this kohen make a mistake, tell him, you can keep this, but make sure to take challah on that dough you're going to make, okay? Know that this isn't challah. You can keep it, but just take challah, right? When you make this dough with that flour, add it to some other flour, make a dough that's obligating challah and take challah from there. Milotna. Now, why would we think that you could do that kind of thing? Because we have a precedent for this in a different case. Another case where someone gives the kohen something they shouldn't have given. You remember there's perforated pots and non-perforated pots. If it has holes in the bottom, it's perforated, then it's as if it's attached to the ground and you're obligated in truma on a Torah level from anything growing in that pot. But if you have something growing in a pot that has no perforation at the bottom, no holes, it's not viewed as attached to the ground, you're obligated in truma on a rabbinic level. Now, what if you took things that grew in your perforated pot and grew in your non-perforated pot, and what you decided to do was, I'm going to take truma from the ones that are obligated by Torah law in the perforated pot, and I'm going to use that as my truma for the Rabbanit truma, okay? Now, it actually theoretically could fix your Rabbanit truma. So if let's say you have one lemon growing in a perforated pot, you have a bunch of lemons growing, right? A lot more lemons growing in your non-perforated pot. And you take that one that grew, so you have none left that are Torah law. You take that one, you give it to the kohen. So you've now fixed all your lemons that are derabanan because you've taken something stronger, okay, even though you're not really supposed to do that. But you've given the kohen something that actually wasn't fixed itself because you connected it with derabanan, and that's not on a Torah level. You haven't taken truma on that one lemon. Really, what you had to do was take a bit of that lemon and give that to the kohen. And you didn't do that. You gave him something that wasn't fixed at all. So now the kohen, again, has something that's not fixed. It's the same kind of idea here. And what do we say? We don't say you have to return it. We say truma, it's viewed as truma, meaning you can keep it as a gift, the kohen, but but you have to take other lemons you have in your house and take truma on that one lemon that you got from this kohen, from this non-kohen. Okay, so there we tell the kohen, go fix the situation, but we don't tell him go return it. It's like you stole something, or not. We don't actually say it's like you stole, but it's saying you have stolen property in your house. To which they say, betray money tzai, becha money lo tzai. This is an interesting theory. This is the first answer. First answer is we assume when it's two different pots that the truma came from, the kohen will listen to us and fix it. But when you took flour from your big flour pot that was, a pot full of, or a container full of flour, and you gave me some of the flour and it all came from one place, that actually seems more to me like Halla than the truma, which clearly were from two different pots. So we're worried that the kohen might not actually listen to the rabbis when they tell them to do this because he doesn't really think it's an issue. Or ibagema lo'olam kohen meitzat because savra balabayit nitakna isato. What's the problem? In the perforated pot, what happened? We already said that the guy who gave the truma was left with nothing on a Torah level. So he's got nothing he needs to fix. But in the case of the dough, if you take the rest of your flour and you make a batch of challah with it, you'll say, oh, I already took challah from this. I don't have to take challah again. And then if we don't make the kohen return it, you'll think that you fulfilled your mitzvah. So we make the kohen return it so as not to have you make a mistake. Okay? That's the other option. So that's why we can't do this. So then they say, wait a minute. But why would you think that worked? Well, you know it doesn't work. To which they say, no, yodea ve'ena yodea. Again, the same as we answered before. Before we were talking about the kohen, now we're talking about the regular person who gave the challah. Yodea she'em afrishim challah kemach ve'ena yodea desavar ta'amamai mishum tirpah de kohen kibla ale. When I, as the kohen, accepted your truma, your challah, maybe you thought I can give up on my rights to get it as dough, and it was fine with me. I accepted it as a gift. So you think you're actually sorted. So that's why, okay, you don't say like in the nakuv and eno nakuv that you can keep it because of either we're worried you won't listen in this case, but it's different than the nakuv and eno nakuv because there were two different pots, or we're worried that would be me as the kohen, or we're worried that the balabayit, owner of the dough, will think that he's sorted and won't fix it. Second question, and this will end, Right? One was, why don't you leave it in the kohen's property and just tell the kohen, just make sure not to mess up your dough. But now we say, why don't we let the kohen keep it and just tell the owner, go take new challah. Okay, this didn't work for you. And if we tell him, then he'll listen to us. And how do we know he'll listen to us? So that we can rely on that, because milot nan, in that same Mishna about the nakuv and eno nakuv, in the reverse case, misha eno nakuv ala nakuv, if you take the dirabanan one and you try to take truma on a doraita, and you're left with the doraita fruits, the ones that are obligated by Torah law that have holes in them, then what do we say? If you gave me from your dirabanan, that clearly didn't work at all. But if you give it to me, truma v'yachzor v'yitrom, I can keep it. I don't have to return it to you as the kohen, but you have to, we tell you, you have to take truma again. That didn't work. How they said, we already answered this question. You'll listen as the owner when it's two different things. You had a nakuv and an eno nakuv. You can understand the difference, that you made a mistake. But when it's one batch and you took flour out of one batch of flour, maybe you won't listen. To which they say, velot side, wait a minute. People don't listen when it's only one. We have a case where we say the exact same thing. We can let it slide. Why can we let it slide? Let's see. V'hatnan. Hatorem, another issue of truma is, if you have good fruits and bad fruits, you can't take the disgusting ones and give that to the kohen. Makes a lot of sense, right? That's called hatorem min hara'a al hayafa. You take from the bad on good produce. Hatorem kishut, if you took zucchinis, v'nimtza tzemara, you gave me some of your zucchinis and they were bitter. Okay, I'm the kohen. I got bitter ones. Avatiach, watermelon, v'nimtza saruach, and you gave me the rotten ones. Truma v'yachzor v'yitrom. It's truma, but we tell you, take it again. Now, this is only one. You're a mafresh from one place, and yet we're not worried that you're not going to listen. So they say, no. Don't try to question us from there, because shane hatam demida oraita truma ma'al yehi. That actually, you can't take your disgusting stuff and give it to the kohen. But the truth is, if you did, it actually works. Okay, why does it work? If you take truma, sorry, I see my internet's a little off. I'll wait a second. Can you hear me? Okay. If you take truma from bad produce and give me the bad produce and keep the good for yourself, it is actually effective. It's just that you shouldn't do it. So therefore, if you did it, the truma is truma, and we tell you take truma again. But if you didn't, it's not the end of the world, because you actually did take truma. It was effective. How do we know that? Because Rabbi Eli proves it from a pasuk. Rabbi Eli, how do we know it's effective? They learn it from this pasuk. You won't get a sin when you separate your truma from your produce. Now, no kadosh, if it's not truma, then nisiyut chet lama. This is a great line. If it's not even truma, then how can you have sinned? It can only be a sin if we call it truma and it's bad truma. So mikam the torem and hara'a yafasha truma to truma. Here we learn that if you do it and you give me your rotten fruits, it's a sin, but it is truma. Okay, so that was all just to prove. Even in one, that specifically if it's in one pot, meaning, right, if it's in one thing, meaning the kemach, you took the flour from a container of flour, you won't necessarily listen when the rabbis tell you fix it. The reason why we're not worried in that case of the Ra'ala Yafa is actually because it's really effective. So worst case, if you don't do it, you don't do it. But in the Halla, you really haven't fulfilled your obligation of Halla. And that's why, again, we make the kohen return it. So what we did was we took Rav and Shmuel, who had this machloket about somebody who betrothed his sister. Can we view it as a gift? We questioned it. Shmuel, who said it's viewed as a gift, we questioned it from this case of Halla. Why can't you view that as a gift to the kohen? Why does the kohen have to return it? And we said that case is because there's a concern that the kohen might think it's Halla, because even though he knows it's not, he might think that he could be mochel on his rights to get it as dough, and that it actually does count, which would then mess him up when he makes his own dough and puts this and attaches it to his dough. Then thinking that he's not chayiv and challah anymore. And then we just had two questions, which is based on those mishnayot about the truma. It looks like normally we wouldn't make the kohen return it, but we distinguish between the cases in a few different ways. That's it for today. I know the end was a little bit complicated, but you can go over it and see it again. But that's the basic gist and the structure of this part of the daf. Wishing everybody a great day. See you tomorrow.